Welcome, everyone. I have a treat for you. We are welcoming Makhtar Diop, who is the managing director of the IFC, an incredible organization that has done so much good around the world and has partnered with the Engine. And we're going to talk about how you take incredibly important breakthrough technologies that can have a very positive effect on the world and actually bring them to the world. So, Makhtar, thank you so much for joining us at the Tough Tech Summit today.
Katie, thank you so much for having me at the summit. It's a real pleasure.
So, Makhtar, before you took on this new role at the IFC, you were the Vice President of Infrastructure. You've spent many years at the World Bank, working in Africa. There's probably no one better that knows all of the opportunities to make the world a better place, but also some of the really difficult areas that we have to deal with challenges, like climate change or what happened during COVID. And I really want to explore with you, since we are in a partnership, to really think about how to take these tough technologies all around the world so that they can have a positive effect. Like, what have you seen in the last few years? What is your kind of perspective on what needs to happen in order for these kind of technologies and positive changes to be at global scale?
Now, Katie, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. You know, beside what I've been doing at the bank and my various positions, I'm just passionate about technology adoption. I think that technology throughout history have allowed us to make to leapfrog and to solve very, very big issues. And tough tech is, for me, the ultimate sector for investors who are looking to support positive impact. And we are in a world where people are not only interested in making money, but they want to change the world. And I am a subscriber to the MIT Tech Review, and I see that the context that you're having for the 35 best research under 35 is a good illustration of what I have in mind. We have people who are young, who are seeing the world differently, who are seeing the impact of what can be done, but who are putting all their technical knowledge at the service of it. And I think that this COVID-19 crisis have shown us that we can do a lot on it. We are currently helping companies investing in Africa in mRNA. 2 years ago, nobody could even envisage that you can have production of mRNA vaccine in Africa. It was just something. You are just one place in Africa where you have viral vaccine on yellow fever. This is Institut Pasteur de Dakar. Besides it, there is no vaccine which are produced in the continent. Today, we are talking about leapfrogging and producing mRNA vaccines that will be helping to solve not only the COVID crisis, but also addressing all these more than 20 diseases that are affecting the population in Africa, malaria being one of the most important things. It's clear that investment in tough tech take a much longer time. There is a longer maturity, and that's why institutions like ours, which are not looking only at the short-term impact of what we can do, but think about what we can do to address more difficult issues that our planet is facing, which is climate change, which is fighting poverty, which is addressing the challenges of an aging population, what we can do to address all that. So this is what I'm saying. People are putting money behind it. In 2020, alone, 2.3 trillion were invested for impact. So there is a big convergence between investors and people who want to really change the world.
I love that. So can we press in a little bit on kind of the mRNA scale up in Africa? So what does it take to actually do that? Is it private capital with the IFC? Is it government? You know, how did you help to make that happen? Because I think it is a template for other types of manufacturing or tough technologies. So I'm just curious, how did you stimulate that to happen across Africa?
No, that was great. You know, we're always starting from a problem to solve. We have this youth crisis, and we saw that only 3% of African people were vaccinated. And when we have this COVID-19 crisis, all countries, developed country or more advanced country, were first focusing on their own population to be able to give them access to vaccine. So there were a pre-purchasing of all these vaccines, and we found ourselves in a situation whereby even when a country had the resources that they receive from the World Bank or other institutions to buy vaccine, there were a shortage of vaccine in countries. So for that reason, we say we cannot stay idle. We need to make sure that there is enough production of vaccine in Africa. So we look at countries which wanted to move in that direction, those who have already an ecosystem which was ready to be able to move in that industry, and who have also an ability to attract quickly capital investment. So we have now working on 3 countries, on South Africa, on Rwanda, and Senegal, which are countries where a company like biotech and now have been indicating their willingness to invest. So we are working with them on that. It requires a few things. It requires to change the regulation in countries to make it simpler to attract investment in this area. The approval, the time to approve a vaccine, it takes is very long in some countries. How to shorten it and to use the best practice. We need to work on the human capital side, because we need to have people well trained to be able to work in this sophisticated industry, and we need to have an ecosystem where people have been already dealing with this type of question. We know that South Africa had a long tradition of research in the medical sector. Senegal also in the Francophone world have been doing that. And Rwanda has been working very, very aggressively in building an ecosystem which is around science and technology, attracting American universities in science, Carnegie Mellon, attracting Google, attracting the next Einstein, which is an African NGO which aiming at developing mathematics in Africa. So they're creating a science ecosystem to be able to develop, and that's part of it. So this is the kind of things that we are working on, and we're using our equity, we're using our lending to be able to support them.
That's amazing.
So let me turn to you, Katie, and ask you, as we talk about mRNA vaccine, which is something quite important, but not only for COVID-19, because let's remember that malaria is killing more people than COVID-19. And today we have an opportunity really to use mRNA vaccine for malaria. What are the trends that you are seeing? You are in the middle of it. You are the one who is in the middle, breathing deep tech and tough tech, making it happen. So what are the trends that we are seeing?
Yeah, so there are 3 main areas that we see so many important trends on. And let's start with human health and agriculture. So if you think about the world population growing and land becoming less usable because of global warming, the ability to feed the world's people and deal with disease states, COVID-19 only being one of them, right? We see so many trends on democratizing healthcare, whether that's diagnostics that are cheap and accessible at home, whether that, and for tropical diseases, like think about chikungunya and dengue and all of these diseases that kill many, many people every year, and often, much less privileged nations and people. Or you see things like, hey, how are we going to not give drugs for diseases, but replace whole parts of the body? So if you look at macular degeneration, if you look at over 70 population, which the world's population is aging, if you look at that population, almost everyone gets macular degeneration. But how is that regenerative medicine going to get to people where it's not $1 million cure, where it is accessible to many, many people around the world? You see these incredible entrepreneurs who have an eye towards democratization, meaning that many people will be able to have this cure, not just the rich. And we love these PhD students who are coming out of physics and biology and all the different engineering disciplines that are thinking about the whole world and using AI and computer science to guide how we're going to build these physical products so that we can get them to market faster, so that we can build machines that could be deployed anywhere and used anywhere, that then you could create these global companies. So that's kind of in human health. So there's this huge convergence between global health, global populations, feeding, curing disease, reducing costs, and using the technology stack that we've built over the last 30 years in order to make that happen. Then on the climate tech side, there's so many incredible things happening, right? We all know mitigation is going to be important, but we also know we're going to have to rebuild our grids. We're going to take carbon out of our grids. We're going to build grids where we've never been able to have them before. We're going to have to build transport lines that are much more efficient. We're going to have to build roads and bridges and houses that last longer or create less carbon in the first place. So you see green you see green cement, you see green steel, you see all kinds of new materials out of our material science labs that have a much lower ecological footprint. And they could be used for building things like seawalls or make it faster to build more housing for people that don't have housing. So like I'm throwing a lot at you, but what you should take is we are in a golden age of breakthrough science, and that is because computer science and the physical sciences are now together in their innovation cycle. And that means it's just going to go faster and faster. And so hopefully, and this is what I think is so incredible, and I'm sure you see this too, in these young entrepreneurs, they're not thinking selfishly. They are thinking about how these kinds of technologies scale across the world. So instead of them thinking very narrowly about their beachhead markets only being in the US or only being in Western Europe or only in China, they're thinking about how they could have an impact, how impact and making money come together. This is back to your point about $1 trillion has gone into these types of investments. But I think we see a generation that not only knew climate change was coming and it's in their bones that they have to do something about it, but then COVID hit. And they saw also how our supply chains failed and how many people were unable to make a living. And so that they're now all really thinking about how do we change those things. So that's our third area of kind of advanced systems, whether that's decarbonizing semiconductors or democratizing how we do supply chains and where things can be manufactured. So if you can't tell, I think I have one of the most fun jobs in the world. And there's so much hope for what we can do and how we are going to come to a better place as a total global community.
Katie, not only you have a fun job, but without realizing it, you influence so many people. When I was just 5 minutes before joining line, I was saying, if he's asked me what are the 3 areas that you see coming, you will be surprised that on my sticker here is written climate change, health, and future of work. So without us, you and I talking, you are very much influencing people like me who think that these 3 areas. When I was talking about future work, about thinking a lot about other things relating to the aging population that we're having, and that the implication it have on the way work will be organized, the issue of localization, the issue of robotics, the fact that the model of labor-intensive jobs in some countries where labor is cheaper might be challenged by the fact that we have now 3D and robotics and so forth. So I was just listening to you say, oh, I don't know, maybe I must have read somewhere one of your articles, because it was exactly the 3 points that I had in mind. You made a point, Katie, which is for me interesting. I think it's not only what we are seeing is a lot of new science coming, but a faster rate of adoption of technology, which was, a lot of the things were existing in the past in fundamental research, but was taking a lot of time to get to application and so forth. You as a scientist, that's my impression from outside, is that the pace of adoption has been accelerating. And there's something also that I'm very interested in, is what will be the impact of quantum computing in all these, where we will have material science taking a new life. You will see a connection with more computers. You will see a GPT-3 used for language and search. All of these things coming. So how do you see things like quantum computing as a technology that might be adopted very fast?
Such a great question. I mean, we see computing in general, whether it's AI or quantum, as having a fundamental impact on every industry. And it's really cracking the ability to crack the code of many of these fundamentally difficult problems that current compute power can't crack. And whether that's in, drug discovery or system level, understanding how systems work, we see so many possibilities. We have an investment in quantum, but also we've looked at all of the new hardware companies coming up, and we just think it's super exciting. It's early. We're not exactly sure what problems can be solved, but the more companies that come forward and scientists that come forward, the more excited we get about the area in general. And so, I think there will be more and more investment there. I don't think it's some people think it's overhyped. I don't think so. I think we've yet to discover how much impact it will have on us. This pulls on something that maybe you see as well, and I'd love to talk about, which is we are now beginning to have digital natives, so kids that all grew up with technology in the palm of their hands, start to graduate college and run the world, right? And so I think that's part of the reason there's going to be more and more technology adoption, is that generation doesn't think anything, they think everything is still in the Stone Age. And so they're going to force that adoption, which I think is really exciting for especially some of these climate technologies and quantum AI. And, we're going to have to hold on to our seats, because the world is going to change even faster. It's just going to keep going faster and faster. And I would love to pull on, okay, so the joke about fusion is that it's always 30 years away. That's not true anymore. We are less than a decade away from having a fusion power plant that produces net positive energy. If you think about a continent, you could choose any continent you want. You could choose Africa. You could choose, Asia. If you think about very cheap, clean energy being able to power a grid and light up parts of the world that currently that's not possible. Think about how that changes the education cycle, the medical cycle. what do you see there, and how do we make sure that technologies like that don't only get stuck in a few places in the world?
Now, this is a great question, Katie, because for us in working in development, one of the big challenge is how to, while we are working on solving a problem of today, we are not locking ourselves in a solution that will be totally obsolete and totally outdated and not solving the problem the best ways we could. So we are always, we always have to deal with that tension of today versus not tomorrow, but what we know that will happen and is happening. That's why I'm very interested in the pace of adoption of technology and the way we could drive as fast as possible the cost of it. A good example has been PV solar. When PV solar, I led the Africa region at the World Bank from 2012 to 2018. And it's interesting because when I started that position as vice president for Africa, we're talking about 22 cents or 20 cents of electricity, solar generated electricity by kilowatt in Africa. And it was not far from the rest of the world. When I left, it was the last auction we have was 1.6. So in less than 6 years, we moved from 20 plus cents to 1.6 cents. And that is just to show you how the transformation can be very fast and can really change people's life in such a short time. And one of the questions we are facing is that when we attracted the private sector to invest in those countries when the price was 22 cents, we need to have the support in accepting to revise those costs, those prices to the consumer, so that it reflects the real cost at a few years later. So all this financial engineering, this regulatory arrangement in the back of what you are doing on the technology is something that is very, very important. And I think that the agenda of energy, particularly storage of energy, will be very, very important in the future, or it's still already very important. And the big question that people are discussing and will be discussing, for instance, in a few days in Glasgow during the COP26, is that can we really run a network and have a base load which doesn't rely on fossil fuel energy if the country doesn't have access to hydro, for instance, or nuclear?
Yes, I mean, I think the question of storage is fundamental. So because it opens up wind, it opens up solar, and also other forms that maybe we don't even know or yet can imagine being online. And we have invested in that area and think it is fundamental. It's fundamental in every region of the world. And so I think, for instance, one of our companies, Form Energy, is a very, very cheap, large solution that can help really take off coal plants and many other forms of natural gas plants and really bolster wind and solar as a base load fuel, right? And clean fuel. And I think it's an iron air battery. Iron is in many, many parts of the world in a very cheap substance. So it means that it is accessible to many parts of the world. And the question is, how do we scale that faster, right? And get it to Africa and different parts of Asia, as well as the US and Western Europe. And I think you'll see that company and many more doing really important work all over the world. And I think the thing that I'm excited about working with the IFC is you can't imagine that breakthrough technologists understand regulation and country norms and who they should partner with. But I think your team knows that better than anyone, and also how to get into different places in a positive way, in a way that is positive to those economies and the people that live there. So, and that all connects to the future of work, right? You also want the total economy there to benefit from the technologies and people to be trained and run those facilities that live there. So, I mean, I think that's the interesting part about our connection, is how to do all of those things in a positive way. I wonder, for you, are there examples of technology adoption, maybe in another part of the world, that you think are, you know, a template, like maybe something in South America or in Asia that you've seen that you're super proud of, that we at the Engine and our community here could learn from?
Yeah, a good example has been E25 Bio, which is working to provide accurate diagnostic of COVID-19 and mosquito-borne infection diseases like dengue. You mentioned dengue earlier, and that's something that is very important for us. And we have been supporting that company in running pilots in Latin America and in a pioneering at-home rapid fever panel for diseases such as also Zika, which has been affecting Latin America a lot. So Latin America is a place where we are testing some of these innovation, and that's a good example. To come back to what you said earlier, is that for us, one of the things that really would like to do is three things. As you summarize it, is to bring long-term capital, to build our knowledge of the market in which we are working, and to be a convening power to bring researchers in more advanced economies to emerging economies. So that's the role that we are playing, and that's why we created that unit on disruptive technology, which is focusing mainly in investing in that space and allowing us to basically scan what is happening in your community, what is happening, what is applicable. My main message is to continue pushing the new generation, ones that are thinking about those solutions, to also think that it can be deployed in an ecosystem which is not the one in which they are living in more advanced countries, but to think about if this technology were to be deployed in a different ecosystem, we could do better. Let me give you an example, Katie, that I would like really to see if you can make more progress, is cooling. If you look at today, the amount of waste in the cooling systems that you have in a lot of emerging economy, of tropical weather, of country, which I think is huge, and the impact on climate change is massive. But there is much less discussion on it because it's just not easy to capture. And I would be very interested in seeing, application of what has been done to improve, to make it more efficient, to use material engineering to be able to do better on house standards and to improve the technology on things like cooling, which are today much less discussed internationally because it affects just one part of the world.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. Today in our investment team meeting, we were looking at a couple of companies that are working on new HVAC systems, ones that could retrofit current buildings, ones that could really service new building, new infrastructure. It's a very difficult area to crack, but a really, really important one. And there's single family housing, but there's also these huge infrastructure buildings that have very inefficient HVACs. And I will tell you, there are a lot of interesting ideas out there. We haven't funded one yet, but we're certainly looking carefully at that area. And I do believe it's both a materials change, but also it could really come from architecture and kind of built environment people. So it's a confluence, and we love that. We love when multiple disciplines get involved in thinking about how to change a whole industry. And I think HVAC and cooling is not just a part of the world anymore. If you look at North America, Vermont, the whole northern part of North America used to not really need air conditioning. Now everyone's installing air conditioning. You can't even get air conditioners because of supply chain problems, but also because everything's heating up. And so it's not, I wish it were only one part of the globe where this was a problem, but it's getting more and more extreme. So the solution is more and more important. And that's exactly what we do. We try to look at what are these really big problems, and can we push those ahead faster by investing right out of the labs, right into kind of the next generation, young people who know and want to create a change there. So I don't have a solution for you today, but I can tell you there's a lot coming.
No, that's great. I think that you're perfectly right, that it's a multidisciplinary approach. I mean, this is a lot of things. Actually, if you look at the old architectures that you have in some of the tropical countries, traditionally they were built to be able to really optimize it with the weather. It's that just the mass production and the adoption of certain standard actually have taken us away from a solution traditionally, which was much more adapted to an architecture which was much more adapted to the climate in which we are working. But one of the things that I'm also interested in, where you stand, what are the factor for success or for failure for any companies that you are financing and funding, sorry. And yes, I just want to learn from you about that.
I would say two of the most important things are, will the breakthrough technology, could it have a substantial impact, not a small impact? Like could we create a substantial company and have a substantial impact in the world? That's the first thing we look at. And then the second thing we look at is, do they have the team that can actually bring it to market? Because Makhtar, you know, there's a million ideas, a million great ideas. But if you don't have the team with the backbone to bring this to life and to get through all of the struggles that any startup would have to get through to become a really big, important company and have the impact they want to have, then it's not really worth investing into. So we look at both of those very carefully. And if we have a yes on both of those, then we look at, what is their plan? Is their plan substantial? Can they actually do the work? You know, are they just good at ideas and it's a great team, but they can't actually do the work? Because if you could put all three of those things together, then you have a shot at really having an impact. And so that's what we look at. And, you know, that's our criteria essentially for investment. And, you know, one of the things that's so wonderful about what we do is I get to draft on all of our great universities and the great thinkers there that understand the really big problems, but are nurturing a generation that cares. And so that's what that's the pool that we get to play in. And I think, you know, you've seen a shift over the last 10 years on how much people care about impact and about global impact. There's lots of discussion, and I want to ask you about this before we run out of time. You know, there's so much discussion about us competing, US and China competing with each other, and we're going to divide the world. There's so many ways in which we could unite the world instead of thinking about it as a division. And I wonder, I know the IFC has had a dramatic impact in Asia and that you really pull the world together. How do you think about that? How do you think about ensuring that we're kind of all in this together and that all parts of the world are benefiting from new technologies?
I think that by having further this conversation, I think that this conversation, which brings different people. I'm from Senegal, West Africa. I'm not young. And you have people in the audience who are younger and coming maybe from Vermont or coming from LA or other part of the world. But also you have people who are watching who are certainly connected from Asia. It means that the world is today much more integrated. When you go to visit emerging economies, you realize that the young generation based in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, or in the US, think much more alike than we think. And actually, they're exchanging much more than we think. So I think that there is no option to accept, to support that movement. You will not stop it because they're not asking anybody authorization to connect, to exchange ideas, to learn from each other, to just build a common project. When the young population in the world went and took the streets in Europe or in the US or in other part of the world to demand better action on climate change, they didn't ask authorization on anybody, and in no time it became from a localized intervention from someone in Europe, in the Scandinavian country. It became an international movement that affected young people across the world, and by affecting them, mobilize them, and make them change our mind, us who were older and from a different generation. So I think that in spite of some spikes from time to time where you have a slowdown in that process, I do believe that is irreversible.
I couldn't agree more. I think, people are already connected. I mean, that was kind of the last generation of technology, right? And that will affect how, we deal with climate change or, COVID-19. Certainly, there was so much. I think one of the most hopeful things for me was that the world scientists, when COVID-19 hit, began talking to each other. And if you ask those scientists, they will tell you it was inspiring. All the walls came down. It didn't matter where you were from or what university. If somebody had a good idea, they wanted to collaborate. And I think that, in my mind, is what's happening with climate change as well. There's so many interesting technologies. People are collaborating across continents and universities in order to solve these problems. And then we're going to have to collaborate financially also to ensure that they get to all the different areas of the world. And I could not be more pleased to work with you and your team on that. And I'm wondering if you had any wishes that, for what the engine could do or what deep technology could do and orient. Is there anything else you wish for that we could make happen?
No, continue doing the great job that you're doing. You are changing much more than you think that you are changing in this world. We are here to support you. Let's work together to enlarge that coalition, to bring people maybe who are not as convinced as we are on the impact of technology in changing this world, to bring them. Let's try to bring more people from emerging economies and more scientists from emerging countries to be part of this conversation, to hear from them. And I think that all that will help us really bringing more resources, more money from the market, because I think that now more and more people are convinced that you can have impact and at the same time make money. So let's continue reinforcing that, being a good example. We didn't talk about ag tech, but this is something also very important. When the farmers in the poorer countries, in the emerging economies are not making enough to survive, but could really double, triple their income just by having less of their production be rotten because of the technologies they use. All these kind of things are bringing smile to us, but more importantly, are changing the life of those that we would like to help.
That's wonderful. I want to thank you so much for being here, and I want to also thank you for having such a wonderful team to work with, and I look forward to collaborating further.
Thank you so much, Katie. It was my pleasure, and I will. You can count on my full commitment, my team commitment, IFC commitment. I am a strong believer, and we are strong believers of the role of technology to change this world. He is demonstrating it every day. So let's continue that conversation, but also any ideas that you have to take it to the next level. I want to take it to the next level. I will do whatever I can.
Wonderful. And next time in person.
Next time in person.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Bye.